I'm going to say something extremely obvious right now. If you're relocating to the Triangle or really anywhere, and you have children, one of the things that you're possibly most concerned about is where those children are going to go to school. You move in blindly, more or less, when you relocate. And so we're going to try to give you a little bit of sight here. We're going to try to give you some insights about what schools, how to choose schools, what are some myths with regard to choosing schools, how rankings work into this whole thing, and what are some things you really need to be thinking about when you and your family are moving to the Raleigh-Durham-Chapel Hill area. My name is Bill Stevenson. I'm with Spotlight Realty, and thank you for watching our channel, Living in Raleigh-Durham-Chapel Hill. Today, I'm talking with Sarah Keiger from Triangle School Consulting. She is going to help clear up, help give you some insight into how to choose schools, how to choose areas, because sometimes, you think you're choosing a neighborhood, but often you want to choose the school that serves that neighborhood first, and we're going to get to some advice on that. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Sarah, my first question is, when somebody is relocating to the Triangle and they're concerned about schools, what do they often get wrong?
I think the thing that people get wrong the most is that they immediately look at a school's ranking. Maybe they go to a site like niche.com or greatschools.com.
Everyone does that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they see, the school is a 5 out of 10 or whatever it might be, and they think that that means something important about this must be a good school or this must be a bad school, and it's just not as simple as that. Those sites use their own algorithms to determine how they come up with that final rating, and there's just a lot more that's important about a school than basically a standardized test that kids take once a year, which is mostly what those rankings are based on.
Well, exactly. The rankings are based on the students, not necessarily the schools, right? So they're judging the students' performance. So basically, it's not a school ranking at all. It's a student ranking.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that is where people often go wrong from the beginning, is just putting too much stock into those rankings. And I feel like it's fine to look at those and kind of get an idea of like, okay, where are some of the maybe the better ones? But what I really caution people against is necessarily disregarding some of the schools just because maybe they have a slightly lower rating, because there's a lot more to the story.
So here's a question. How confusing are Triangle school systems for somebody moving to the Triangle?
Okay. Very, very confusing. I mean, it's my full-time job to help families with.
That's why you exist. That's why your business exists. Right?
Exactly. So here's an interesting thing. There are 5 different school districts in the Triangle area. So a lot of times when relocation families come to me, they say things like, I just want to be within maybe 30 minutes of the airport. That will land you in 5 different school districts. Okay.
Exactly.
So there's a lot to know in terms of which of these districts, what are their strengths and challenges, and what are they known for? What do we need to watch out for? There's a lot to know.
Right.
But then aside from just school districts, we have 73 magnet schools in the Triangle. We have 45 charter schools in the Triangle. We have over 70 private schools in the Triangle. It just compounds. And so one thing I hear from 100% of parents that I work with is that the landscape that we have today is not the landscape that existed when we were children.
Precisely. Indeed. I just went to the school that was down the street.
Right. Our parents did not have to deal with this at all. We just went to the school that was down the street. And I hear that from literally everyone.
Right.
So it's like we are first generation school choosers of like parents trying to figure out, what does all this mean? And if there's all this choice, it must mean that I need to kind of engage in this rat race of figuring it out. And I couldn't just possibly settle with what the neighborhood school is. There's kind of a fear of missing out, of not, exploring all the options. So I think just the sheer number of choices is overwhelming, but also just that feeling of, like, I need to do all the research. I need to find the best one. I think that we're kind of prone to that these days, too.
Indeed. I mean, it's fed to us on a silver platter on the internet or anywhere else. And so we think that we have to engage with that.
Yes.
Yeah,
yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Cool. So you mentioned 5 different school districts. So what's the difference between them? There's Durham, there's Durham County, Wake County, Orange County, Chapel Hill, Carrboro. What's the 5th?
Chatham County.
Chatham County, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's There's a lot of differences between them. Size is one of the most important ones. So Wake County being the largest of all, that also means there's a lot of opportunity there when we're talking about magnet schools and specializations and early colleges. Because it's such a large district, there's a lot of opportunity for if your child wants to specialize in things.
Yeah.
And so that's something really cool to look for. But also you have a district like Chapel Hill, which is a very, very small district, just one part of a very small county. And they're known for having very highly rated schools, but they don't have nearly as many of those sort of extra options as you might think about.
You might say that because they don't need them, right? They don't need other choices because the Chapel Hill Carborough schools are just fine the way they are. Yeah.
Sure, right. But you're not going to get a STEM school, and you're not going to get a tech school or all those sorts of things. So it's not that one is bad and one is good, right? But they're just these differences that come from the demographics, from how large our districts are. So I think those are some of the main differences.
Yeah. We touched on this a little bit. But is it true, just to ask the question bluntly, is it true that where you live determines where you go to school in the Triangle?
Well, it depends which of those school districts you want to go to.
Right.
So for districts like Chapel Hill, Orange County, Durham County, the answer is yes. It is very straightforward.
Durham County and Durham City?
They're
the one thing now. I know that, but but I'm going to challenge you on that.
Okay.
Because it is fairly common for people who live outside of, for example, Jordan High School's district to claim that they're interested in agriculture so that they can go from wherever they are to Jordan High School.
Well, that's a magnet program.
It's a magnet program within the neighborhood school. Right.
Yes, exactly. So I think where things get tricky is that in those counties, in Chapel Hill and Durham and Orange counties, you can type in your address into the district school lookup tool, and you will have a seat at a base school, and you are guaranteed a seat there.
Yes.
That part is pretty straightforward. It gets a little more complicated. I know we'll talk about that a little bit more in Wake County, where sometimes you might type in your address and that school is capped, meaning we can't accept any more students, particularly in certain grades. And so then it's not...
And is that specifically a Wake County
That is specifically Wake County, yes.
Yeah.
So that's where it's like...
Wake County, is Raleigh, Cary, Morrisville, Apex, places like that.
Yes, exactly. So that's where it gets a little bit more tricky, where it's like, well, yes, there is a school that's guaranteed, but there's kind of an extra step of now there's an overflow school for the address that you're assigned to. But I think going back to your original question of, is it true that your address determines where you go? Well, not if you want to apply to magnet programs or charter schools or obviously private schools. Those sorts of things are not bound by your address. You have a lot more options about where you look and things you can apply to.
Many of those choices are largely secondary, the high school choices. I know there are some that aren't, but for instance, the International Baccalaureates that's high school. The Jordan thing that I told you about, the new tech thing is high school. The early college thing is high school. There's one called middle college.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of those are for middle school or high school, but there are lots of magnet programs also for elementary school.
Okay.
So dual language immersion is a very popular one. There are Montessori elementary magnet schools. So there are lots of options for the lower grades as well.
So we've touched on a little bit that there are lots of choices, public, private, charter, at least. What's the difference, and how do you advise parents to choose between them, or how do parents choose between them?
Okay. So public schools, those are the schools that we were talking about where it's based on your address. So if I live in Durham County schools is where I am looking.
Right.
If I have a Chapel Hill address, then that's the district that I'm in.
Right.
So magnet schools are operated by the individual school district. So if I, again, live in Durham County, there are magnet schools that I can apply to, but they have to be in Durham County because magnet schools are operated by the district themselves.
Indeed.
Now, charter schools are a little bit different because you're not bound by any county lines with charter schools. You can live anywhere in North Carolina and attend any North Carolina charter school.
Right.
So if I'm living in Cary and there's a Hillsborough charter school that I'm interested in, That's all well and good. So that's one of the main differences in terms of who's eligible and who can apply to what.
Right. Yeah,
Huh.
just to be clear, magnets are a subset then of the district, of public schools,
That's
right? So they're run by the school district, but they just have a little bit less. They have specializations, and they have places you can go across sort of neighborhood boundaries to get to.
That's right.
Right. Yeah.
That's right.
If you apply.
Yeah.
And get it.
And so private schools, those are obviously run the gamut in terms of starting at preschool, running through 12th grade, and they will cover all sorts of specializations.
Mhm.
Montessori, college preparatory, Waldorf, project-based learning, like you name it, we've got it here in the triangle.
Yeah.
And then in terms of how do parents choose, I think the most important, there's two things that I think are the most important. One is being very clear as a parent, as a family, about what it is that's important to us. What are our values around education? What are our goals for our child's education, both short term and long term? What do we think is important in our child's education? So these are kind of big, lofty ideas, right? But it's very important for people to be clear about what those are, because that starts to lead us down a certain path.
Right.
And then the other piece that we have to consider is the child themselves. So yes, we know what is important to us, but we also have a very unique child that we're talking about.
Sure.
And what is it that they need? And maybe we have specific learning challenges or strengths of this child. And so those things are also going to help us narrow down the focus as well. What does the school need to have to be able to serve this child really well? So that's where it starts to get really specific for every person that we're talking to.
Right.
So when people come to me and they say, well, what are the best schools? Well, who am I talking to? Well, who are you? What's important to you? And who is your child? Those are the things that I think are really important.
And you didn't mention it, but I assume that, especially with private schools, the budget is part of the equation too, just like any college decision. My wife teaches at a private school. My kids for some time went to a private school, and then it was just so delightful to go from the private school to my kids went to magnet schools after that were free. It was just so wonderful to go from paying tuition to not paying tuition.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's go dive a little bit deeper into charter schools. What are they? And why do we hear so much about them? What is it about them that causes so much consternation and conversation and obsession, let's say?
Okay. Good question. So as we mentioned before, charter schools, they are public schools, so they are free. They are funded by our tax dollars, but they are not associated with any school district. They are standalone entities. Now, there is a wide variation in charter schools and how good they are, honestly. And it really depends. Parents really need to do their homework to learn about the charter schools and see how are they stacking up against the public schools. I think what draws people in is there's a couple things. One, a lot of the charter schools have a specialization. They might be a project-based learning charter school. They might be a Montessori charter school. And so a lot of times, if you have a child that you feel like, oh, they could really fit with this kind of style of teaching, and that style of teaching is free at this charter school, that feels really interesting. And so I think that's really the most common thing. I also think there's this thing about charter schools where in order to even play the game at charter schools, which is, doing your research, entering a lottery within a certain time period, to get on a wait list, all these sorts of things, you're kind of self-selecting a group of people in the population who are already invested in their child's education, able to navigate a system. And so I think it leads to people feeling like there's something better about this school or something that's going to feel differently. Now, the truth is, they have to teach the same exact curriculum because they are public schools.
Right.
They have a little flexibility in how they teach it, but a kindergarten classroom in this charter school has to cover the same material as that public school kindergarten. And I think people
how to play in a sandbox.
I think people lose that a little bit in kind of the rat race, if you will, of applying to all the schools.
There's also an accountability thing that they're not accountable to the school district, and some say they're not accountable to. They're more accountable. They're corporations rather than educators and things like that. So that's what people sort of have to wrestle with, I think.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, do you have to apply to get into charter schools, and how do you do it?
Yes, great question. So yes, you do have to apply, but it is a very simple application. You basically need to enter demographic information so that you can toss your name into the hat. So there's no writing of essays or saying this is why I like this school. It's really just saying, please put my name in the lottery. Here's my email or phone number, and you can kind of contact me. So it takes maybe about 5 minutes. And I think that's also part of the reason why people apply to them so much is because it's really easy to do. And so if you...
Like the Common App going to
it's like, well, I'll apply to 10 of them and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. Now, are they hard to get into?
They are very hard to get into.
All of them?
Not all of them. Yeah. The ones that are good.
Good. Okay. What do we mean by good? We'll get to that.
Okay. Yes, it is not uncommon to hear someone say, I'm number 400 on the wait list for this charter school. Yeah. So yes, it can be very hard to get into, but again, doesn't take very much to apply. So
yeah, but that's true of magnet schools too, right? Magnet schools, you have to apply. Probably similar process,
exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And sometimes you don't get into those either.
Yes.
Right? Especially the good ones.
That's right. You can oftentimes hear people who are very far down on a wait list for a magnet school.
Yeah, Durham School of the Arts. My kids were all applied there many times. Eventually, all got in, but it took some doing. Yeah, that's why we were delighted to go to that free one rather than the one we were paying for. Okay, I hope this isn't a controversial question, or I hope this doesn't put you on the spot.
Okay,
but when families come to you and they're relocating and they're coming to the Triangle and they're very concerned about education. The education is of high value to them. Is there any place that they tend to wind up more than others?
Interesting. I think there's a few places that they typically ask me about first. Okay. One of those being Chapel Hill schools. Oh, we've heard that those are, top ranked. So that's usually something that they want to know about. I would say Cary and Apex schools is another one that they will say either we've heard about those or maybe we've seen from those online rankings that there's maybe a higher concentration of highly ranked schools.
Right.
So I think those are the probably the most popular two that people start with. And then, of course, that's where I'm going to get in and say, tell me more about your family. Yeah. Tell me more about your child. And we may not end up there. We might. But I think those are probably the two biggest ones.
Great. All right. Mistakes. What are the biggest mistakes that families relocating to the Triangle make as far as you are concerned and schools are concerned?
Okay. I would say one mistake is relying too heavily on those rankings and ratings and maybe just not necessarily understanding where those come from. And really, truthfully, where they come from is mostly students taking a test at the end of the year and seeing how they did and how many of them were proficient in reading and math. And so the thing is that doesn't tell us anything about the culture of the school. It doesn't tell us about the quality of the teacher. It doesn't tell us about, is there a strong PTA where parents are involved? And, it misses all of those things that when you talk to parents and you get those things from them about what do you care about in a school, it's usually those things. It's not, I want my child to perform the best on the end of grade test.
Right.
It's all those extra things that really make a school, and the ratings don't really show that. And so I think it's just relying on that too heavily from the beginning.
Yeah, I agree. And another thing, it doesn't tell you how, it tells you how the students ended the grade, but doesn't really tell you how they began the grade. And so it's not a progress report. It's just a snapshot.
A little snapshot. Yeah, exactly.
So let's say somebody's moving here in the next 3 months or the next year. When should they start planning these things?
Well, the earlier, the better.
Of course.
I think one thing that surprises a lot of people is how early things start happening. So the fall is whenever magnet schools, charter schools, private schools are all going to be opening up their tours, their applications, and that's all planning for the next fall.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really working 1 year in advance. And so I think that's where most people are surprised. Like, I have to know a year ahead of time. It's like, yes, you do. If you want to have all the options.
Right, exactly. So, but if you move into a neighborhood, you will be able to go to school,
Yes,
right?
that's right. You're right. You will be able to go to
a school, right? So it's not it might not be the school that you want, or the school that you would choose if you took the time to. But you know, you're going to have 13 years of educating your children. So
Yes.
maybe the next year you'll
Yes,
be able to,
absolutely.
be
Yeah.
able to spend the time.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
especially if folks are relocating in the spring or summer, which is very common,
Sure.
right? They
all the
want
time.
to, yes, they want to finish out the school year where their kids are now
Mhm.
and then move when the kids are on a break. Makes total sense. That's not an ideal timeline in terms of what we were saying, planning that
Right.
kind of fall cycle, but there's plenty that we can do in terms of, well, let's figure out a short-term plan.
Mhm.
And maybe it's not ideal for the long term, but then we can give ourselves time to kind of
Right.
plan, all right, for next year, what might we want to be
Right.
working on.
As far as private schools go, when are they bringing kids in and,
Okay,
and,
so
and
that's
making
all.
decisions on that?
Yeah, so that's also the fall. So primarily October through December is when they're going to be taking applications, doing tours,
Mhm.
interviews, and all of that sort of thing. And then by usually late February is when decisions will come out.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So again, it's still operating about a year ahead.
And is it fair to say that they, unlike public schools that have probably more rules, that they have more control? So there's more flexibility.
Yes, but I will say for families who are moving again in that kind of spring to summer timeline, many of them are interested in private schools.
Sure.
And yes, it can be a little overwhelming to think, oh my gosh, we've missed the timelines. What are we going to do? But we're usually able to work something out. And
Right.
a lot of times that's calling a lot of schools and seeing, who's got a spot at this grade or that grade, but we usually can work it out.
So what would you, Sarah, what would your step-by-step plan be for helping a family relocate to the Triangle and choose a school?
Okay.
Aside from choosing a great realtor first.
That is important. It's very important. And it's good whenever I've got a good realtor that I can work with because
Right.
it's a hand-in-hand process when you're like trying to find the school but also the house. So I think the first thing, as I mentioned before, is getting to know the family. So my background is I'm an education social worker. I am a very relationship-oriented person, and it's very important for me to know who I'm working with and what's important to them. Because for one family, it might be we are looking for top academic rigor. I want my kid to go to Ivy League. And another family might be I want hands-on project-based learning, a Waldorf. Right. I mean, that's very
Or a great drama program, football team,
absolutely. You
lacrosse,
name it,
whatever.
right?
Yeah.
Like we're all unique and we have different goals and priorities, and that's for me, that's the most important thing is to figure out all of that first and do a really holistic assessment of the family to figure out what is it that's important to you, and then we're going to start narrowing down the places that we want to look. So it really just depends on what people are looking for.
Right.
I would say, so that's the first thing is kind of narrowing down what's important to us, then getting either a short list of kind of areas of the triangle. So maybe it's, okay, maybe there's an agriculture school or something, right? Or a tech program or something like that. Okay, then that's going to narrow us into this area of the
Right.
triangle or this area of the triangle. So that can be helpful for people, especially if they're looking at public schools, right? Is just kind of getting a zone of like, let's focus in here on a house search. Or for other people, they might want very specific schools, and that might normally come more in the private school world.
Right.
If we want a private school that has these sorts of things, okay, here's what those exact schools are going to be. And then having people, I'm going to help educate people about those schools or those areas. Getting them in for tours is going to be really important, and then helping them walk through that either application process or the ranking lottery process, whatever it might be.
So how do you do it? How do you encourage and match students and parents to the right school rather than the quote unquote best school?
Okay, so that goes back to us doing that kind of deep dive intake session where we are figuring out what is important to the family, What are your values? What are your goals around education? And then learning all about the child. Where are they currently in school?
Mhm.
What do their teachers have to say about that? How does the family feel about that school environment?
Mhm.
What are we looking for that's similar to what they have? What do we want to change? So tweaking all of those things to then where I have this full picture in my mind of like,
Mhm.
okay, I know exactly who you are and who this kid is and what you need. And then I'm going to present options and I'm going to educate people about, let's just say there's 4 schools that I think match all the things that they've told me, or maybe they check 4 out of the 5
Right.
boxes,
Yeah.
right? So I'm going to, tell them about each of the schools, but then more importantly, explain why I chose them. So
Mhm.
based off of these things that you told me matter to you,
Right.
here's how this school does those things. And so I think
But
that's
how do you know so much?
ah,
What's behind what's the secret sauce? How do you know so much about all of it? How can you take 5 school districts? I don't
mhm,
know how many dozens of schools there are in those
mhm,
school districts
mhm.
between all of the grades, and you can reliably tell a parent, "This is a good match for you," or, "These 5 schools are good matches for you."
That's a great question. There's kind of a multifaceted answer.
Yeah.
So one is I tour schools all the time.
Mhm.
So I
I guess the overarching answer is it's your job.
it's my job.
Okay.
That's right. It's a
But go on,
full-time
but
job.
how?
Yes.
I'm just curious.
So one is touring schools all the time. And that means private schools, charter schools, public school, like you name it,
Mhm.
I'm touring them all. And I'm not just touring them once because if a school gets a new principal, a year later, that might be a whole different ball
Yeah,
game.
makes a difference.
How the teachers feel in that school. Right. So it's not just a one-time thing of, oh, I've toured that a couple years ago. It's a continual process of looping back and kind
Yeah.
of keeping tabs on everything. The other thing is keeping up with district level news. And so that's attending board meetings for all of these districts, knowing what's coming down the pipe,
Mm.
not just what's happening right now, but there's big changes that are coming and needing to stay abreast of those things as well. I also have a podcast, The Education Breakdown. So that's where I am talking to teachers, I'm talking to principals, I'm talking to parents, and I'm bringing them onto the podcast so that everyone can hear. Tell us about this school. Tell us about what you like about it from a parent's perspective, or,
Mhm.
what's it like being a teacher here? And so that's another great way of just getting information out there too, or
Right.
extracting information from
Sure.
certain people. Um, and then the other thing is just by nature of having clients and working with a lot of clients year over year over year, you also pick up a lot about why people are leaving certain schools, why people have come to me to get away from something or to get towards something. So I also kind of in that informal way pick up a lot
Sure. I
along the
bet.
process. Yeah.
I bet that's where you get much
A
much of
lot.
your insider
That's right.
information.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's right, right. Do you read the rankings?
I do read the rankings, and I think that if anything, it's to see if it matches up with my gut feeling
Mhm.
of what I would if I had to give the school a ranking.
And of course, if a parent comes to you and says, "What I care about is rankings," you should know what they are.
Yeah, that's true. Like,
Yeah.
I know what it says the top
You'll probably
schools
try to talk them
are.
out of that, but, yeah.
I might, depending
Yeah.
on. But yeah, I think usually it's coming from a place of curiosity of, oh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
I wouldn't have put that school on a top 5. Huh. Okay. So that's
Yeah.
usually how I'm looking at
Yeah,
them.
indeed. Okay, so let's say parents are, contemplating private schools. What can they expect with regard to how difficult it is to get into these private schools, and how much are they gonna cost?
Okay. How
It's not
difficult?
like okay, so
Yep.
a lot of people relocate here from and this is a big part of this, is that they come from New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey,
Mhm.
Chicago, whatever. And private schools in those areas and Washington, D.C., they're not nearly the same price as
Mhm.
private schools here, at
Mhm.
least in my experience. So tell me about that.
Okay. So how hard is it to get in was
Mhm.
your first
Yeah.
question. It depends. We have nearly 70 private schools in the Triangle,
Wow.
and there's a wide variability in how big these schools are. Some of them are kind of micro schools, you might consider them. Some are, just a K through 5 kind of warm hug kind of
Yeah.
place. And then you've got places like Durham Academy and Ravenscroft and, something a really high tier elite
Right.
kind of prep school. And so one, the price is going to vary between all those things that
Sure.
we've
Yeah.
talked about, but also how hard it is to get in. And so obviously, when we're talking about kind of the big names, the ones that are more prestigious, I guess, it is going to be quite hard to
Sure.
get in.
Yeah.
I will say
Let me say,
that,
okay, so
yes.
just quite hard. So Ravenscraft-Durham Academy, for example, not specifically either one of those or schools like that, let's say.
Yeah.
Duke, maybe it's like 4%
Okay.
of people get into Duke, right?
Okay.
It's not like that, is it?
It's not like that, but I would say in general, you could probably expect around a 20% acceptance rate
Wow.
for some grades. And then there are some specific grades that receive a lot of attention, maybe 6th grade, 9th grade, things like that. And you
Yeah.
could be looking at like a 10%
Yeah,
acceptance
yeah.
rate. So in some regards, it can be like a UNC Chapel Hill acceptance rate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's fair. I mean, not a lot of people are switching schools in 11th or 12th grade,
That's right. Yep.
And so it might be easier to get in those circumstances.
Right.
Yeah.
Fewer people applying at
Yeah.
that time, but maybe only there's 1 or 2 seats that are open. Sure. And then in terms of the price, so I would say maybe around like $6,000 to $10,000 is what you're going to see at the lowest end, going up to around 35 to 40,000 on the high end. So that's a lot of variability.
Sure.
The state of North Carolina also runs the North Carolina Opportunity Scholarship, so people might recognize that as a voucher program. And so not all private schools accept that voucher program, but many of them do. And so that can also help offset the cost of tuition payments for families.
And why would a school not want to accept those vouchers?
It's a great question. It depends on who you ask, but I will say the voucher does come with some strings attached from the government about what kinds of tests you need to give at certain times of the year. And some schools say, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
We don't want, the state to be telling us what we have to do. We're an independent school for a reason.
Right.
We like making our own rules and doing things our own way. And so for some schools, I think that's usually what it's about.
All right. Some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
True or false? Public schools in North Carolina are not nearly as good as public schools in New York.
I would say
I surprised
false.
you with that one.
I know, you
Sorry.
did. I would say false. I think that what we are seeing right now in the news is that our state is unfortunately underpaying our teachers a lot. And so, that is a sad state of affairs that I am hoping is going to be rectified really soon. But we have really top-notch schools here in the Triangle. And we have obviously dedicated teachers and administrators, people who have dedicated their lives to educating
not for the money.
children. And not for the money. So there's that. That's a good point. So I would say false for that one.
Okay. True or false? Chapel Hill schools are high stress. Public schools, high schools.
I'm going to say false.
Okay.
I think
Or more high stress than others, let's say.
I think I'm still going to
Okay.
say false.
Yeah.
I think there is a reputation, that's why you asked the question, of them being high stress high schools particularly.
Right.
And there is some truth to that because when you look at things like the percentage of students in a Chapel Hill high school that go on to college or take the AP classes or what their average SAT is, you can see that, yes, they do have a larger percentage of a certain group of students who are kind of on that path. But that doesn't mean that that's everyone in the school, right?
Sure.
If your child, if that's not the path they're destined for, or that's not what's important to you, it doesn't mean that they're going to be in a school that is stressful, right? But if that is your child, they are highly motivated. They've got their eyes set on, the big leagues. There's a great opportunity there for them too.
There's a great opportunity there, but that kid's going to be stressed almost anywhere. Because
right. They're putting it on themselves.
Right. If they get an A-, it's all over. They'll never get into their dream school.
Yes,
anymore, right?
that's exactly right.
Yeah, indeed. Fact or fiction? Durham public schools are not as good as the others in the area.
Okay, that's definitely fiction.
Okay.
there are amazing public schools in Durham public schools. I know lots of people who send their kids to Durham public schools and wouldn't have it any other way. I know lots of people who dedicate their lives as teachers and administrators, and like you said, not for the money in Durham public schools. And again, they wouldn't have it any other way. So there are amazing schools in Durham and a lot of great opportunities in terms of magnet schools, specializations, CTE opportunities. It is a very rich and diverse district.
Lots and lots and lots and lots of choices. And with regard to Durham public schools, my kids, went to Durham School of the Arts, which at the time was ranked by U.S. News and World Report as the best high school in the entire state of North Carolina. And that's in Durham. That's a free line.
That's right. It's still very highly rated.
Yeah. And they're building a brand new school. So it's apparently that's going to be nice too.
Yeah.
All right. Another myth busting. True or false? I know I've gone back and forth from true and false or fact and fiction or myth or whatever, but
that's okay.
Let's say true or false. Wake County schools make you move around all the time.
False. Okay. So there is a lot of growth happening in Wake County. We mentioned the capped schools being one way that they deal with growth, right? But people are not moving around all the time. And the capped schools are in one usually like concentrated bubble, right? It is not all of Wake County. The areas that are seeing rapid growth where the district can't keep up with building new schools, which they are every year. We've got more schools coming on. So yes, people do get moved around, but I feel like that's a very broad blanket statement, which is not accurate for everyone who lives in Wake County.
But time out, people do get moved around?
People do get moved around.
So I know the cap thing. Like if you move in and the place is capped, you can't go to that school. You have to go to some other school.
Yep.
But does capping mean that sometimes some students can't go to the school that they started in?
So not necessarily with capping, but in the next 1 to 2 years, there are 3 brand new schools that will be coming online in Wake County, and that means district lines are going to be redrawn.
Of course.
And so that's where we're going to get things that are going to be shifted around. So not so much with capping schools, but just as more schools are built, which again, like I said, they are continuously. That's where we have to redraw the lines.
Yeah, but that's different, right? That's not like taking 5 students out of one school and putting them in another school. It's taking basically everybody who lives in this neighborhood and putting them into a new school that's just been built in to serve that neighborhood.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So talk for a minute about if people want to reach you, want to know what you do, how you can help them, where do they go?
TriangleSchoolConsulting.com is the best place to go. And that's where you can, read all about my background and see the packages that I provide and all of those sorts of things. I also have a podcast, The Education Breakdown. So that's where people can go and hear those interviews from local teachers and administrators and parents. So that's a great free resource for folks. I also have an Instagram where I go and I make videos of all the schools that I go and tour. So that can be really fun for people just to get a kind of a sneak peek of, oh, I've heard of that school. Like, let me see what it looks like, or, see what Sarah has to say about it. So that's another good way.
We'll put links to all of that in the description here and somehow connect you with Sarah. And what services do you offer beyond the podcast and the Instagram and all that?
Yeah. So I mostly work with people on an individual basis. And so typically that looks like working through 2 different meetings where I'm doing an intake session, learning all about them, and then I am meeting with them to guide them through all of the school options and kind of the plan for how are you going to move forward with these recommendations that I have for you. That's the most common way that I work with folks. Particularly for relocation families, I have an on-demand workshop that is on my website. And that is a really great place for people to start if they're either just starting to think about moving to the Triangle, or maybe they just found out that they're going to be relocating for a job, and that people are open to different areas of the Triangle. The on-demand workshop is really great for helping people learn a little bit about each of those 5 different school districts. Hopefully, once people learn through that, they're kind of narrowing down, okay, I don't think that sounds as great, or I want to focus here. There's over 90 minutes of video content broken down into modules
Great.
so people
Yeah.
can learn about magnet schools and charter schools and private schools. So that's a great place just to start to get like a solid lay of the land.
Yeah.
And then we can always, tweak and get more into the weeds after that.
Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And I think that anybody who's watching the channel has learned a lot today. I know I have. And it's really valuable for people who are moving here. So I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me, Bill.
Sure. And if you are moving to the Triangle and you need help like this, meeting people like Sarah or anything else that we can do for you, we help people relocate to the Triangle every day at Spotlight Realty. So feel free to schedule a time on my calendar using the Calendly link in the description, or click on the QR code in the channel header. And I look forward to talking with you. Thanks for watching.